The medical bay of the Cathari starship was quiet except for the soft humming of machines and the slow breathing of the injured. The lights had a gentle blue tint, warm enough to ease fear but dim enough to remind everyone that this place was meant for healing, not comfort. Daniel Rowe, a human soldier, lay on one of the narrow beds near the wall. His ribs hurt with every breath, and his head still throbbed from the crash that had brought him here. But even with the pain, he found himself staring across the room, always at the same person. Her name was Sarai. She was a Cathari healer, tall and almost luminous under the soft lights. Her skin looked like polished silver touched by moonlight, and her eyes carried a glow that reminded Daniel of cold stars. She moved quietly, gracefully, like her steps were meant to avoid disturbing even the air. Every soldier she touched relaxed, as if the pain itself feared to stay near her. Daniel had never seen anything like her. In fact, he had barely seen any aliens before this war. Humans and Cathari were enemies, fighting across distant worlds, destroying cities and families. But in this room, all those labels felt distant, like echoes from a different universe. Sarai noticed everything. She noticed the trembling hands of injured soldiers. She noticed when a patient lied about pain. She noticed when someone had cried before coming in. And most of all, she noticed Daniel, because out of all the beings in the room, he kept staring at her the most. She had tried to ignore it at first. Perhaps it was curiosity. Humans were still new to her. She had healed only one other before Daniel, and that human had been unconscious the entire time. But Daniel's gaze was different. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't anger. It wasn't the look of a prisoner or an enemy. It was something softer. On the fifth day, when Daniel was awake enough to walk a few steps but still weak, Sarai finally approached his bed. She stopped in front of him, her hands folded together, her voice as calm as flowing water. "Why do you keep staring at me, human?" She asked. Her question was simple, but her tone had no accusation in it. Only confusion. Only curiosity. Only a quiet, almost fragile honesty. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. He felt heat rise to his face despite the cold air of the room. He opened his mouth but no words came out at first. He wasn't sure how to explain the truth, not without sounding foolish. I didn't mean to," he said finally, looking away toward the wall. I don't know. Sorry." Sarai tilted her head. She had heard lies before, and Daniel's voice did not carry one. He truly didn't know how to explain it. But she also sensed something else, something deeper, that he didn't have the strength to put into words. "It is not a problem," she replied softly. "I just wish to understand." Daniel risked a glance at her. Her eyes reflected the soft lights around them, shimmering like small stars. She looked at him with no anger, no suspicion, something he wasn't used to. Humans and Cathari had been killing each other for years. Yet here she was, asking him questions like he was simply a person, not a soldier. Not a threat. "You don't look at me like the others," he said quietly, surprising even himself with the honesty that slipped out. Sarai blinked gently. "How do others look at you?" Daniel swallowed. Memories flashed: fear, disgust, pity, anger. The looks he had gotten from his own people after the crash, after losing his squad, after being the only survivor. He shook his head. "Different," he said. "Just different." Sarai didn't push further. Instead, she pulled a small glowing device from a nearby table and began scanning his ribs again, her movements slow and careful. "You are healing well," she said. "But you should rest more. Your bones are still fragile." Daniel gave a weak laugh. "Feels like everything's fragile." Sarai paused. She didn't fully understand human humor, but she understood pain. Emotional pain, loss. She saw it in him, not just in his injuries, but in his eyes. "Fragile things can still be saved," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, surprised. And for the first time in days, his chest felt lighter, not healed, not whole, but lighter. He didn't tell her the real reason he stared at her. He didn't tell her that she was the first being in a long time who looked at him without fear, without judgment, without seeing him as broken. She would never know that. At least not yet. And Sarai, unaware of the storm inside him, simply walked away to help another patient, her presence as gentle as starlight. The following days moved slowly on the Cathari ship. But for Daniel, they felt strangely peaceful. War still roared outside these metal walls, but inside the medical bay, everything was soft voices, footsteps, lights. The place was built to calm even the most frightened warrior. And for Daniel, it was becoming a strange kind of refuge. Sarai continued her work with the same gentle rhythm as always. She moved from patient to patient, scanning wounds, mixing glowing medicines, fixing torn skin with threads of light that flowed from her fingertips. The Cathari believed healing was an art, not a job. And Sarai. She lived that belief with every breath. Daniel watched her, though now he tried to be more subtle. But he couldn't help it. She fascinated him, not because she was alien, but because she seemed untouched by cruelty. Even though the war had taken lives on both sides, she treated everyone as if they deserved to live. No judgment. No hatred. Only a deep, steady kindness. He hadn't seen that kind of kindness since before the war. One afternoon, when Sarai approached to check his progress, Daniel noticed how quiet the room had become. Most of the patients were resting. Some slept. A few Cathari soldiers whispered together in a corner. But the noise of pain was gone for now, and in its place was the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Sarai placed her hand a few inches above Daniel's ribs. Light flowed softly from her fingers, warm and soothing. Daniel exhaled, relaxing without meaning to. "You are healing faster now," she said. "Humans recover well under steady care." Daniel smiled a little. "Maybe it's because my healer is good at her job." Sarai blinked, tilting her head slightly. "Is that meant to be praise?" "It is," Daniel said. "A big one." A faint shimmer appeared in her eyes. For her species, that shimmer was the closest thing to a blush. "Thank you," she whispered. She began adjusting the band around his chest. Daniel could tell she was trying to keep her hands steady, but they trembled just slightly. He wondered if she even realized it. Her calmness was almost a shield, but maybe even she wasn't as unshakable as she looked. "Sarai," he said softly. She paused, looking at him with those star-filled eyes. "What?" she asked. "You never get tired?" "I do," she said. "But pain has a voice. I hear it every day. I cannot rest if someone is calling me, even if they do not speak." Daniel studied her face. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that came from too many long nights and not enough sleep. "Why don't you take a break now?" he asked. "There are still others who need help." "There always will be," Daniel replied gently. "But you're not a machine, Sarai. You deserve rest too." She looked away for a moment. "My people do not rest easily. We carry loss differently than humans." "Loss?" Daniel repeated softly. "What have you lost?" For a few long seconds, Sarai did not answer. Her hands froze over his bandages, and something flickered across her expression, something Daniel had never seen before. Pain, real pain. Not physical, but the kind buried deep in the heart. "Many things," she said at last. "Many people." Daniel wanted to ask more, but he sensed she wasn't ready. Her silence didn't feel like a wall, it felt like a wound. Not yet healed. So he didn't push. Sarai finished adjusting his bandages and stepped back slightly. "You should try walking today." Slow steps. No sudden movements. Daniel nodded. "Will you be nearby?" She hesitated, as if surprised by the question. "Yes," she said. "I will be here." A moment later, when Daniel stood on his shaky legs, Sarai hovered close. Not touching him, but close enough to catch him if he fell. She was watching him carefully, and Daniel realized something strange. She watched him the same way he watched her, with attention. With curiosity. With something unnamed. When he managed a few steps, she let out a small breath. Like she had been holding it the whole time. "You did well," she said. "You sound proud," Daniel teased. Sarai looked away quickly. "Do humans always speak so boldly?" "Only when we're grateful." For the first time since he'd met her, Sarai allowed a small, faint smile. It lasted only a second, but to Daniel, it felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. In that quiet moment, a connection grew between them, a fragile thread of trust. Made from shared silence, gentle words, and unspoken pain. They did not know it yet. But this thread would soon pull them together in ways neither had ever expected. The peaceful hum of the ship didn't last. Far beyond the walls of the medical bay, war raged like a storm. Explosions shook the hull, sending vibrations through the floor. Sirens blared, red lights flashing in rhythm with alarms that pierced every corner of the ship. Daniel felt each tremor in his ribs, and every jolt reminded him that safety was only an illusion here. Sarai's calm presence in the medical bay had been a small world of quiet in the chaos, but now it could not hold. The doors slid open with a hiss, and soldiers rushed in, shouting orders and calling out names. Smoke and debris drifted through the corridors. Daniel's heart pounded, not from his injuries, but from the fear that someone he cared about might be hurt. He tried to stand, every movement sending sharp pain through his ribs, but he needed to do something. "I have to help," he said, his voice louder than he intended. Sarai came to him quickly, her hands on his shoulders, steady and firm. "You are injured," she said. "You cannot fight. You will only be hurt again." "I don't care," Daniel shouted. His voice cracked. "I can't just sit here while they fight outside. I have to do something." Sarai's eyes softened, but her expression remained serious. "And if you go out, you will die. And I will not be able to save you. You will be lost to me, human. I cannot allow that." Daniel froze. Her words hit him harder than any warning siren. There was no anger in her voice, no pleading, only concern, pure and raw. He realized in that moment that she cared for him in a way no one else ever had. No human, no soldier had ever spoken to him like that. "I can fight," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I may be hurt, but I can still make a difference. I can still save someone." Sarai looked at him, and for a moment, Daniel saw something flicker in her eyes, something he hadn't expected. Fear. Real fear. Not for herself, but for him. She reached up, gently pressing a hand to his chest. "I cannot stop what is happening outside," she admitted softly. "But I will not lose you. Not today. Not while I can prevent it." Daniel's chest tightened. He had never known anyone to care for him like this. He had survived countless battles, seen his friends die, watched entire squads vanish, and yet, no one had ever spoken to him as if his life mattered. Sarai did. The alarm screamed again, and the hull shuddered violently. Daniel gritted his teeth and tried to stand taller, despite the sharp pain. Sarai did not let go. She adjusted her grip slightly, steadying him, keeping him from falling. "You are brave," she whispered. "But bravery without caution is not wisdom." "I'm not afraid of dying," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "I'm afraid of losing everything that still matters. And right now, that includes you." Sarai froze. Her hands stayed on him, but her face betrayed a flicker of something she could not hide: shock, perhaps, or awe. She had healed soldiers, treated warriors, and faced death countless times, but no human had ever spoken to her like this. And now, standing in the chaos of the war, her heart raced with a fear she did not want to admit. They stood together, silent for a moment, the alarms and distant explosions forming a harsh backdrop. Daniel could see the determination in her eyes, and it mirrored his own. Despite her calm voice, he sensed that inside. She was just as human as he was in this moment, fragile, scared, and desperately holding on to hope that the ship shook again, harder this time. Daniel steadied himself against the wall, feeling the weight of his pain, his fear, and his newfound connection to Sarai. He realized that no matter what happened outside, no matter how dangerous the war became, he could not leave her behind. She had given him something no one else had a reason to keep going, to survive. Sarai looked at him, her eyes steady now, shining with a quiet strength. "Then we face this together," she said softly. For the first time, Daniel felt like they were not enemies, not human and alien. Not soldier and healer, but two souls standing together against a storm that neither had chosen, yet both would endure. And in that moment, the world outside could explode, the war could rage on, and the darkness could press closer. They would still have this fragile thread of trust, of understanding, of connection that neither battle nor time could destroy. The alarm screamed louder than ever, shaking the entire hull. Smoke curled through the corridors like twisting fingers, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Daniel's ribs ached with every step, but he forced himself forward, following Sarai as she moved from one injured Cathari to another. The war outside had reached its peak, and nowhere on the ship was truly safe. Sarai's hands moved quickly, with precision and care. But Daniel noticed something unusual. Her movements were slower than usual, her hands trembling slightly. One by one, soldiers were carried into the bay, some barely conscious, some too badly hurt to survive. Sarai's eyes flickered from patient to patient, but each time she healed one, two more arrived. Daniel could feel the fear in the air, heavy and suffocating. He watched Sarai as she treated a young Cathari soldier, barely older than a child. The boy's chest was pierced, his breathing shallow and desperate. Sarai's hands glowed softly as she worked, repairing torn skin and sealing broken blood vessels. She whispered soothing words in her own language, a song of life meant to calm him. But even her magic could not save everyone. The boy's chest convulsed once, twice, and then stillness fell over him. Sarai's hands froze, hovering over his chest, and her face paled, though her skin was naturally silver blue. Daniel had never seen anyone look so broken. She stepped back, her shoulders trembling, and took a deep breath. Daniel wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. He had seen death before. He had seen battlefields where blood soaked the ground and screams filled the air. But seeing her watching someone she cared for, even slightly, slip away, it was different. "Sarai," Daniel whispered, stepping closer despite the pain in his ribs. She did not respond at first. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, glowing faintly as though reflecting a grief too large for words. Finally she looked at him. Her face was calm, almost too calm, and her voice was barely audible. I do not understand," she said softly. "I have healed so many, but not this one. Why does life end even when I try?" Daniel felt a tight knot in his chest. He had never known anyone so strong, so capable, to feel so utterly powerless. And yet, he understood her pain in a way that few could. "Sarai," he said gently, "you did everything you could. You saved more than you lost, that boy. It wasn't your fault." She shook her head slowly. "It feels like failure," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "All my life I have healed. I have fought to save lives. And still, I could not save him." Daniel swallowed hard. The words he wanted to say, the ones burning inside him, came out before he could stop them. "You've saved me." Sarai looked at him, surprised. "You?" He nodded, his breath shallow. "I was broken when I came here. I thought the war had taken everything from me. My family. My squad, my home. I thought there was nothing left. And then you. You treated me like I mattered. You healed me, not just my body, but my mind, my heart. I'm still alive because of you." Her eyes widened slightly, reflecting the soft blue light of the room. For the first time, Daniel saw her vulnerability fully, and it terrified him a little, but it also made him admire her even more. She had carried the weight of so many lives, so many wounds, yet she had managed to touch him in a way no one else had. The alarm blared again, shaking the walls. Daniel reached out and took her hand gently. "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not now. Not ever. Not while we can still stand together." Sarai's hand trembled in his, and she swallowed. For a moment, they stood like that, two souls caught in a storm of chaos and grief, holding onto each other as if the world outside could not reach them. Then, slowly, she exhaled. You are brave, human," she said. "Not because you fight, but because you care. You do not run from fear, even when it burns everything around you." Daniel felt a shiver run through him. That small acknowledgement, so quiet, so simple, was worth more than any medal, any victory. For the first time in days, he felt hope, not just for himself, but for the world beyond this bay. Together, they turned to the next patient. The war was far from over, and danger lurked everywhere, but for now, they had each other, and that made all the difference. The chaos of the ship had quieted, but the echo of battle lingered in every corner. Smoke still drifted lazily through corridors, and the occasional alarm reminded everyone that the war was far from over. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, his body aching, but his mind more restless than ever. He couldn't stop thinking about Sarai, her hands, her voice, her unwavering calm. Every moment with her had felt like a small light cutting through the darkness he carried inside. Sarai entered the room, carrying a small tray of healing gels and glowing potions. She moved with her usual grace, but Daniel noticed the faint lines of exhaustion under her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged slightly as she placed the tray down. She had been running herself too hard, as she always did. He wanted to say something, but words felt inadequate. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "You watch me closely," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "Why is that, human?" Daniel blinked. He had expected her to avoid the topic, or maybe to scold him for staring. But now, with the quiet of the room and the hum of the ship around them, he felt the courage to answer truthfully. "Because you're different," he said slowly. "I've seen fear. I've seen hatred. I've seen people care only about themselves. But you see others. You see me." Sarai tilted her head, curious. "See you?" "Yes," Daniel whispered. "You treat me like I matter. Not like an enemy. Not like a soldier. Not like a casualty of war. Like a person. And I haven't had anyone do that for a long time." Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer, her hand hovering near his. She didn't touch him, but her presence was a comfort, as if she were willing to let him lean on her even without knowing it. I have healed many humans," she said quietly. "Some awake, some unconscious, but you You are the first who looks at me and sees me, not just my hands or my craft. That is new to me." Daniel swallowed, his chest tight with emotion. "And I'm the first human you've let see that side of you?" She paused, as if surprised by the question. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes, perhaps." For a moment, silence fell between them, filled only by the hum of the machines and the faint creaking of the ship. Daniel's heart ached with the weight of words unspoken for years' loss, loneliness, fear, but now, somehow, he felt that weight lighten. "Sarai," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I was broken when I came here. The war took everything from me, my family, my friends, my home. I thought there was nothing left. I thought I would never care again. But then I met you." Sarai's eyes widened slightly, reflecting the soft glow of the bay's lights. She had seen grief before, but this was different. It was raw, human grief laid bare, yet tempered with something fragile and bright. "Hope. You saved me," Daniel continued. "Not just my body, but everything inside. You gave me hope. You made me feel alive again, even when everything else was lost. And that is why I watch you. That is why I stare. Because I can't lose this. I can't lose you." The words hung in the air between them. Sarai's hand trembled slightly as she reached out, finally brushing a soft fingertip across his arm. Daniel shivered at the touch, not from cold, but from the emotion that poured through him. I did not know," she whispered, "that I mattered so much to you." "Yes," Daniel said. "More than you can imagine. And I never want to hide it from you again." For the first time, Sarai allowed herself a small, genuine smile. It was fragile, like the first light of dawn after a long night. But to Daniel, it was brilliant enough to fill the entire room. "You are brave," she said softly. "Not because of the battles you fight, but because of your heart. You care when it is easier to close yourself off. You feel when it is easier to ignore. That is something rare in your species." Daniel's throat tightened. For so long, he had felt alone in a universe that did not care. And now, with her words, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for him here beside her. Sharing in the quiet strength that neither war nor loss could destroy, they sat together in silence, letting the world outside the bay exist without them for a while. The bond between them, fragile yet unbreakable, had been made stronger by honesty, trust, and the courage to reveal the truth. For Daniel, this was more than survival. This was the first time in years he had felt truly alive. And for Sarai, it was the first time she had met a human who could match her heart. The alarms screamed again, louder and harsher than before. The ship shook violently as distant blasts rocked the hull. Daniel's ribs screamed with every movement, but he forced himself to his feet, leaning heavily against the wall. Sarai was already moving, her hands glowing as she guided the injured towards safer areas. The corridors were chaotic, a flood of Kithari soldiers, injured and frightened, shouting orders, trying to keep control. Outside, Daniel knew, the war raged on like a storm, waiting to consume anyone who stepped out. But Daniel could not stay idle. He looked at Sarai, her face calm but eyes filled with tension, and something inside him shifted. He had survived battles before, yes, but now it was different. This time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about protecting her, keeping her safe, and making a difference where he could. "I can help," he said, gritting his teeth against the pain. "I need to do something." Sarai turned to him, alarm in her eyes. "You are injured," she said. "Your ribs, your body, you cannot fight. You will die if you go out there." Daniel took a deep breath, ignoring the pain. "I know the risk, but I have to try. I can't just wait here while they fight." Her eyes softened, a flicker of fear passing over her features. "I cannot lose you," she whispered. "Not after everything. You have survived so much already. Do not throw your life away." Daniel stepped closer, steadying himself against her calm presence. "And if I stay? I can't just sit and watch people die, including you. I can't. You gave me hope when I had none. You saved me, Sarai. I can't let that go to waste." For a moment, Sarai's hand hovered near his chest. She seemed to weigh the danger, the odds, and her own fear. Then she made a decision. "If you go, you do not go alone," she said firmly. "We face this together." Together, they moved toward the station. Daniel stumbled, his body protesting, but Sarai's hand on his arm steadied him. Around them, chaos surrounded every step, smoke, alarms, wounded soldiers, but neither of them faltered. When they reached the control room, Daniel grabbed the COM panel and activated the link to the approaching human fleet. His fingers shook as he keyed in the frequency. "This is Private Daniel Rowe," he said, his voice strong despite the pain. "I am alive. And the Cathari saved me. Do not fire." The room fell silent. Sarai watched him, her glowing eyes wide, waiting. Daniel could feel the sweat on his brow, the pounding of his heart, the sharp pain in his ribs. Outside, the war could end them at any moment. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, a voice came over the COM. "Daniel, stand down. We hear you. The war is nearly over." Relief washed over him like a tide. He sank into the nearest chair, breathing hard. Sarai placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him, her eyes reflecting the same relief he felt. For a moment, nothing else existed, neither war, nor pain, nor fear. Only the quiet knowledge that they had survived, together. "You were brave," Sarai said softly, brushing a stray lock of silver-blue hair from her face. "Braver than I could have imagined." Daniel smiled weakly. "You're the one who taught me what courage means." She looked at him, her eyes filled with something deeper than admiration, gratitude, relief, and a quiet affection that neither had spoken aloud. For so long they had been soldiers, enemies, strangers. But now, they were something else. Two beings who had survived chaos together, two souls bound by trust, care, and the fragile thread of hope they had found in each other. Outside, the distant sounds of battle faded. The human fleet held its fire. The Cathari ship stabilized, and slowly, carefully, the injured were moved to safety. But the memory of danger remained a reminder that survival had a cost. And that courage was measured not only in combat, but in the willingness to face fear for someone else. Daniel turned to Sarai. "We made it," he said softly, his voice still trembling. "Yes," she replied, a faint smile crossing her face. "And we will continue, together." In that quiet moment, surrounded by alarms that no longer screamed, by smoke that no longer burned, and by the faint hum of a ship that had survived the storm, Daniel realized something. The battle outside had been won not by weapons, not by strategy, but by their willingness to trust, to care, and to act when it mattered most. Sarai stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "I am human," Daniel said, his lips curling into a small, tired smile. "But I learned from you." And for the first time since the war had taken him from everything he knew, Daniel felt that maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or numbers or firepower, but in the heart that dared to care. Even when the universe demanded you look away.